everyone. I'm Dr. Renee Mehrra, and today I'm going to be joined by Felicia Singh. She's a Democratic candidate for District 32, New York City in Queens. Welcome, Felicia.
Thank you for having me on your show. It's great to be here.
Yes, you too. District 32 has always pretty much had for over a decade a Republican leadership. So outside of Staten Island, this is one of the districts that's kind of little different in composition. And share with us some of the areas that I know there are 13 neighborhoods, including southwestern part of Queens, western part of Rockaway, South Ozone Park, Howard Beach, and Ozone Park as well, some parts of Richmond Hill.
Yes, so you named most of the neighborhoods already. We have Ozone Park, Woodhaven, South Ozone Park, Richmond Hill, Howard Beach, Broad Channel, Lindenwood, Centerville. We have majority of the west side of the Rockaways, and that includes neighborhoods of Rockaway Park, Rockaway Beach, Neponset, Roxbury, and Breezy Point.
Right. And your Republican challenger is Joanne Ariola.
That is correct, yes.
So tell us, I know your background is a school teacher. I want to ask you first of all about New York City public schools, the state of New York City public schools. We've seen with the pandemic a lot of inequities coming out in different areas, especially in education and economic side as well. We have over 1 million kids in our public schools, and we see that there's a lot of inequalities when we're looking at, vulnerable neighborhoods, at-risk neighborhoods, low-income, underprivileged children. We see like not getting all the educational resources, the technology. How, as a background with a public school teacher and running for New York City Council, what are your plans for education for our young ones?
Yeah, I've been teaching for over a decade. And in my experience as an English language arts teacher, as a teacher for children with disabilities, I know deeply the inequities of our city system. New York City is one of the largest city systems, education systems in the United States, and it's also one of the most segregated. And the reason why we have this deep segregation within our school systems is because what your zip code is dependent on the type and quality of education you get. We know, research shows this, science shows this, our economy demonstrates this, that when you get quality education and quality curricula, you have the best education you can ever get. But that's not true for every single person. And a lot of the times when we think about education, we have to also recognize that it's intersectional in our views of housing economy, our economic security as well. People invest in homes, they buy property, and they raise their families in neighborhoods in which the school district is better. And we want people in District 32 to be able to maintain their home ownership, be able to send their child to a great schools. But that's actually not true of all of our school systems across the city. So two of the biggest populations we found deep neglect in teaching and doing well is our students with disability and our students who are homeless. In District 32 alone, we have about 1,000 to 2,000 children who are unhoused in this district and go to schools, but then leave our school system and go to be in a shelter, or they might live in a transitional home housing or our hotel shelter systems. That's why it's so important that when we think about education and education equity, we're also thinking about affordable housing, we're thinking about food equity. All of those things impact our students in the classroom. And this is why it's so important we elect a person who has experience teaching children, who has U of T and labor union backing, who's going to represent us in City Hall.
And also destigmatizing the issue of, children with special needs.
Yes.
Our communities don't talk about it, and by the time we come out of denial, it gets a little too late for the child.
Exactly. And that's why parent advocacy is so important, especially when a child is young with a disability. We want to make sure our parents and our guardians, our families, have a strong understanding of their child's disability, is able to read their child's individualized education program in their preferred language, understands the accommodations their child is mandated to have by the city. That IEP is a law binding document. So if the school is not giving your child the services, if they have a disability and they have an IEP, then those are things you need to bring up with your teachers, with the staff in the building, with your principal, to make sure your child is getting the services they have a right to. If we don't have people in City Hall talking about the fact that children with disabilities are having busing issues, we don't have bus drivers, then they're not getting their mandated services. Parent advocacy is low in some school districts or in some schools. That's an issue that trickles down and impacts students long term. And we can't wait any longer to make sure that kids have their services.
And we're talking about violence and bullying as well. There's a lot of issues that need to be addressed in the educational sector. So, I hope this is your priority. What other priorities do you have?
So District 32 is a coastal district, and we were devastated by Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Ida, and we will continue to be if we do not build a climate resilience plan that works for all of us. We have really vulnerable communities like the Rockaways that were impacted by Hurricane Sandy, like Bell Harbor and Breezy Point and Neponsit, and we also have communities of Woodhaven and Ozone Park, South Ozone Park, that are farther away from the coast, but will be impacted by extreme flooding from rainwater. So we need to build a resilience plan that impacts everyone based on their neighborhood and is able to make us all resilient to flooding, whether it's sea level flooding, the rising of sea level, or flash flooding from rain. So one of the things I want to do in City Hall is create an integrated plan with city agencies. The way city agencies work for our community members on the ground is really frustrating, because sometimes you have infrastructure changes in your community where the streets being changed, or you're getting a lot of work done on the roads and you don't have really an understanding of why. This would mandate city agencies to talk to community members, build plans with civic leaders, build plans with elected officials to make sure our neighborhoods are resilient in the best way that they can be.
Yeah, national disaster management is very, very important, especially in that district, which is very vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters.
Yes.
Yellow medallion, crisis that we are seeing almost for the last several months now. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of South Asian Indo-Caribbean families that get affected adversely because of the staggering deaths and dwindling business, and it gets very hard for many families to cope with this. Do you have any plans for that?
Yes. I'm a daughter of a taxi driver, and so this story really resonates with our family. My father was a medallion owner for over 30 years. He's been driving a taxi for over 30 years, my entire life. And what we saw, sadly, was our inability to manage the medallion mortgage, plus a home, plus utilities and other bills that come with being an owner driver. He had to file for bankruptcy in 2019, and unfortunately, the bankruptcy process also put us in a place where we were almost evicted from our home. The United States Bankruptcy Court put a for sale sign on our house on February 5th, 2021, and threatened to evict us in 90 days because we filed for bankruptcy due to the medallion crisis. This was a negligence by our city, and our city doesn't want to take responsibility. Recently in March, or about February, March time, the TLC released a plan, quote unquote, that was supposed to provide debt relief. All it does is give us a grant for about $29,000. And restructuring a grant at $29,000 is not enough when the average taxi driver actually has a medallion loan of $550,000. So what we're trying to push the mayor to do right now, myself, allies, Assembly Member Mamdani, and many other allies across the entire city legislature, is work with New York Taxi Workers Alliance to push the mayor to add a city-backed guarantee. That means fund more money into their current plan so all of our taxi drivers have the relief they need today. We are trying to push for him to do that before he leaves office, because that's not something I want to our communities to inherit come the new administration, who could potentially push this back further. We don't have time. Taxi drivers are at risk every single day trying to make ends meet. I've been a longtime advocate of taxi drivers. I used to go to union meetings with my father before I even decided to run for office, because this is a story that not only impacts drivers, it impacts their entire family. And we can't have something like what happened to my family happen to someone else.
Absolutely. Economic opportunities for small business owners, especially during the pandemic time, we've seen a lot of havoc. What are your plans in that sector?
The relief for small businesses during the pandemic was deeply disappointing. And I'm saying it's disappointing because when our government put out relief in grants and loans, Queens only received 17%. 17% of small businesses were able to access those loans and that relief. So you can imagine the turnover rate for small businesses, especially immigrant-owned small businesses here in Queens. It was very high. Here in South Queens, even higher, because you're looking at a transportation desert and a community that depends greatly on their small businesses to thrive. So what we need to be doing right now is we have a lot of city agencies that are doing tours of our small businesses and giving them fines for myriad of reasons, whether it's violations or COVID emergency plans that are not complete. Whatever those violations are for, what it's causing a small business to feel is a sense of accruing debt. So we want to make sure that in order to cut small business fees, we actually need to hold an oversight meeting of our small business services and our city agencies that are actually giving small businesses more of a burden, and to stop those consistent fines that are continuously happening from multiple city agencies rather than just one city agency doing a tour. The other problem with the issues we're seeing right now is when city agencies do tours, check in on small businesses, whether you're a restaurant or another type of business, you're not doing it in language. A lot of our small business owners speak another language. And when you don't do it in the language, their preferred language, they end up getting fees for things they don't understand. But the city has set up a system for language translation that our agents don't actually use. That's another problem. The third thing that I want people to be aware of is City Council passed a commercial rent stabilization law. So now rents cannot be increased, but we don't want abuse from landlords who own all of these properties that increase rent for small businesses and push them out. So those are the three largest ways we can make sure we protect small businesses on the ground, especially those owned by immigrants.
As I mentioned in the very beginning, this is a contentious race. You have a Republican challenger, Joanna Ariola. This has been primarily a Republican leadership district. How do you think you're going to be the winner in this game?
So at the end of the day, this is a numbers game. This is how many people are going to vote starting Saturday, October 23rd, when you can vote early, and by November 2nd, which is election day. We need as many Democrats to go out and vote in this election as possible. Democrats outnumber Republicans in this district 3-1. What's historical about this race is a couple of things. One, I could be the first Indo-Caribbean and first Punjabi person to ever win a city council election in our history of being in America, in the United States, or at least in New York City. And so we need to know that that's a critical moment of representation for our entire community. The second thing is the possibility of flipping this district from red to blue. Republican leadership has caused for the last 12 years our community to be underfunded and under-resourced. We have 14 train stations, only 2 of them are accessible by train station, by elevator, pardon me. We have our school district where schools look different school by school, when all of our schools could be fully funded. We have 158 garbage cans that we share amongst 4 neighborhoods in this district. We've been left out and isolated for so long, and it is a critical time that we use our biggest and loudest voice, and that's our voting power. My opponent is a career politician. She has been running for office since 1996. She's run for city council before. She's run for our Queens Borough president. She's run for assembly. And what that's told us is that she has built her career and her platform on just running for office and has lost every election. She's never won one. And then second, she has kept a Capitol insurrectionist, Phil Grillo, in power as a district leader in Queens. So her relationship with those people who terrorized our Capitol is one that we need to take to heart here, because that's who we're going to have represent our community. We can't have that. So there's a lot at stake here in this race. We need to choose courage and hope and joy, which is how we've been leading our campaign. We need to choose a teacher and daughter of immigrants to represent District 32.
And that's the general elections are going to be on the first Tuesday of November. That's November 2nd.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Felicia Singh. Wishing you all the best, and let the best candidate win. Felicia Singh, Democrat candidate from District 32 in Queens. I'm Dr. Renee Mehrra. Thank you so much for watching.